I am growing increasingly concerned about the way that people are talking about the latest dump of Epstein files, and I would really like to talk about it. I'd really like your input. So please like, comment, share, help me get this out to the algorithm. Now, I'm not saying that there's some massive psyop trying to create chaos, undermine the credibility of witness testimony, and make it more difficult than ever for Epstein's victims to get justice. And please feel free to tell me if you think I am entirely off base here. But the more content I see around the Epstein files, the more worried I become. Now, we know that Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, everybody who's engaged in this massive cover-up, all of the men who are named in the files, they didn't want any of this information to come to light, and they have only released about 50% of the Epstein files, and they're not complying with the law by holding back the rest of it, and now they're trying to get us to move on, right? They're trying to say case closed, no more investigation, no prosecutions. And we know that they really did not want to have to release this current batch of information at all. And so they have done so in a way that not only improperly redacts information, there was CP that was released, right? Like nude images of children, names of victims were not redacted, and then information, names of potential suspects and other relevant information that should not have been redacted was. Right, essentially, they just barfed up all of this data and were like, okay, good luck, have fun sorting through all of this. We're going to make it as difficult as possible for you. They should have brought in a special master. The data, information, documents should have been organized. There should have been a prioritization. There's like anonymous tips, there's receipts, there's photos, there's emails, there's witness testimony given to the FBI, and it's all just jumbled in together. And I am fully convinced that that is intentional as a way to try and delay or deny justice. And my growing concern comes from the fact that I am seeing an awful lot of people who are just going to the DOJ website and they're just searching up a term. And whatever document comes up, they're making a video about it. On YouTube, they censor much more heavily. But on Instagram, people are just reading without bleeping out anything, without blocking out anything, extremely graphic information in the files. And then they're like, this is proof that Donald Trump did this is proof of XYZ. I am seeing journalists doing really good work with the information coming out of the Epstein files, but I'm seeing an awful lot of influencers who don't know how to do research. They don't know how to triangulate. They're not cross-checking sources. They're not verifying or vetting any of the information. They're just typing a term into the search bar, and then they're making outlandish claims. Again, I'm not saying it's a psyop, but I am saying, damn, that's a really good way to try to undercut legitimate testimony and evidence in the files. Someone just types Wayfair or furniture into the search engine, and then they find out that Jeffrey Epstein bought furniture, and they're like, oh, this proves that QAnon was right. The Wayfair conspiracy is real. So many TikTok videos saying Pizzagate was definitely real because there's receipts for takeout in the Epstein files. That's not how that works. That's not good journalism. And when you make these kinds of claims, then what you have is people who very quickly debunk those claims. And then folks on the right who want to discredit testimony from Epstein victims, who want to make everything that's coming out now sound like crazy conspiracy theory nonsense, they've now got fuel for their fire. And again, I am not saying that it's a psyop. I am saying, wow, these platforms sure incentivize people to make clickbait content, to not bother to check their sources, to make unfounded claims that go really, really viral. People are making an awful lot of money doing this. And maybe we can and should have that whole other conversation about whether some folks are out there just to grift off of the Epstein files and have no intention of pursuing justice or being responsible with this information. So earlier today, my eldest kid and I were on a hike and we were having a long conversation about this very subject. And I took some notes on my phone and I want to read them to you so that I accurately represent what we were talking about. I said, I know the regime has handled this partial release of the documents in a way that is meant to make it as difficult as possible for us to stay focused on pursuing justice. I know that. And monetized content around random searches really exacerbates it. That's what I was just talking about. There are so many videos that I could have made just pulling up an Epstein document and speculating about it, because I'm seeing a lot of that content and it goes crazy viral. Those get hundreds of thousands of views on Instagram. But what is our goal here? Is our goal just to make content? Is our goal to slop farm, right? Is our goal to just get clicks, to speculate wildly? Or is our goal for us as the American people to help the Epstein victims and our entire society pursue justice? And in response to my little rant/meltdown about it, Ruth said, this seems to me like this is a problem with the true crimification of American culture, that people treat real life crimes like an ARG. where the public are all interacting and solving a puzzle. And it's not that citizen science isn't really important, and it's not that it isn't good for regular people to be able to look at the evidence and comb through it. It's that there is really bad reporting coming out right now, and that there are people speaking on the Epstein Files who shouldn't, and they're doing it just to get mad clicks. And I know for a lot of us, we're in this moment where the release of the Epstein Files, all of the things that we're reading, one, deeply traumatic, and two, they've fractured our reality in really significant ways. We're horrified, we're heartbroken, we're a little embarrassed that we have been so naive. We're concerned about how deep the rot goes. We're wrestling with the fact that so many people that maybe we looked up to that are in positions of power and influence have been capable of so much evil, that so many things we wanted to believe were conspiracy theories are actually true. It doesn't mean that every part of QAnon is true. I've seen a lot of creators over the last few days being like, I guess all of QAnon is real. All of QAnon is actually going to turn out to be true. I'm going to quote Ruth here. She said, no, not everything from QAnon was real. Don't get your information from 4chan. They don't have to use code words like Chinese food and pizza or furniture. They just straight up said it. If you look through the files, they weren't hiding anything. I said in a video the other day, the thing that struck me the most was the level of shamelessness, the way that they were so confident they were never going to get caught. They didn't have to have code words. They didn't have to sneak and hide because they felt that nobody was ever going to stop them. They felt that they were above and outside the law, that they were untouchable. Right, do y'all remember that the QAnon people thought that JFK was going to come back from the dead and save them all from Joe Biden or something, right? Remember when they said that Joe Biden was dead and had been replaced with a robot or an imposter? It's very easy in this moment to fall into conspiracy theory thinking. It's very, very easy to believe that it's actually some kind of satanic influence instead of just like greedy rich men working with foreign governments, working with Russia and Israel and the UAE. Just that like we have a long history of men who have no problem, powerful men who have no problem victimizing children throughout human history, and especially in United States history. I said to Ruth, it's not actually that uncommon for men to behave this way, especially not uncommon for white men to have behaved this way. This is a logical extension of what rich white people have done to Indigenous Americans and children and enslaved Americans, Black Americans, and Black children. I said, I think for a lot of us, accepting that human beings have the capacity to be this horrifically evil is something we really haven't had to experience in this way before. And everybody is in shock about it and a little bit in denial. And also it makes us really prone to conspiracy theory thinking. Our thinking runs rampant in this moment. Our minds are racing. Our perception of reality has been fractured. And we don't know who to believe. We don't know who to trust. Suddenly the unbelievable becomes believable for us. Our brains and our hearts are both a little bit broken in this moment. So I can see why people who don't have experience in journalism, I know I'm not a journalist, will just go search up a term and make a whole video and not bother to do research and corroborate that information. I'm personally concerned at the way that I feel some of the content, a lot of the content over the last couple days is tipping into a moral panic, is falling for conspiracy theory thinking, feels a little bit like collective psychosis, instead of trying to pursue justice. And I'm not saying that it's a psyop. I'm just saying it's really convenient for all of the wealthy and powerful people who don't want to be held accountable in this moment for the crimes that they have committed. They don't want the Epstein victims to ever get justice, to have us all fall into conspiratorial thinking, to have us all making content that undermines the credibility of the files in general, making outsized claims, making claims that aren't backed up by the actual evidence at all, because we're just lay people who can use a search engine. So how do we deal with understanding that we have been living in a society where the wealthy and the powerful have been committing truly horrific crimes, where there is an active cover-up going on and an awful lot of wealthy and powerful people would love to avoid facing justice, are working very hard to make sure that they never face justice, where the federal government is saying, we're not going to investigate this any further. We're going to consider this case closed and move on, where the information is released in an intentionally chaotic way. More than 50% of it is still not available to us at all, where there's a huge financial incentive for people to speculate wildly in a way that can be harmful to the overall investigation and the credibility of the information that we do have, and at the same time still be able to actually get justice for Jeffrey's victims, reform the system, and make sure that nothing like this happens again. This isn't an ARG, this is real life. Those are real victims, and the perpetrators are still all at large. I'm concerned about how we do this right and make sure that we get justice.